shall we just go ahead and get started? So welcome, Dr. Nelly Loss. Please make your opening remarks.
Thank you, Meilin, and hello also from me this time, finally from Tallinn, and I need to actually start with an apology for not having you seen for so long time. Our last meeting was just before our last meeting on October 25th. I was got stuck in traffic in New Delhi, and the 20-minute ride turned to be 2-hour ride, and I missed it. And I'm really grateful for Meilin for having taken it over at this very last moment notice. But as we have had quite a, let's say, a long pause from my side, I thought I would perhaps start by highlighting some of these things that I have been involved with from Estonian side, but I think some of these are developments that actually also all of you have been involved with, or probably will be at some point in the future. So, as some of you might know, in July, the European Union finally moved further with digital diplomacy, and in July the Council adopted conclusions on Europe's digital foreign policy, and I believe this is a rather crucial point. Of course, currently we are discussing how to implement it, who will be in charge, and where to discuss these issues and so forth. But what is definitely the strength of this rather short document is actually the approach it takes to digital diplomacy or technology diplomacy, or sometimes cyber diplomacy. There are some countries that consider these as simply semantic differences and perhaps not that much content differences. But the strength definitely is that it takes what I would say a holistic approach, that it really tries to bring in the political discourse on the development on, let's say, democratic digital society. So Europe still continues this values-based approach to digital cooperation, but it really tries to connect the political discourse with actually what's happening on the ground. And I think from this perspective, everything that we have discussed also in this network, either our members' activities in education, in healthcare, in climate, and in so many other sectors, is actually very valuable. So this, I would say, would be also the task of tech diplomats in the future, really to connect these different dots, trade negotiations, development cooperation, economic policies, bilateral relations, also multilateral fora, and so forth. Of course, it also brings in the private sector, which has been missing, let's say, from diplomacy. Diplomats are, I would say, more comfortable negotiating with other governments, and actually how to involve and how to engage in a meaningful dialogue and partnership, not only as a regulator, but also as a regulator, is, I think, something that we will be increasingly seeing. And recently we have also seen that some very few companies and the heads of these companies may also have actually quite serious consequences on our virtual world. And I'm referring to Elon Musk and his recent changes in attitudes and the subsequent actions. So this I am personally very much looking forward to, and maybe also in the future we can have somebody from the General Foreign Service or somebody also bring this in and also see how it connects with other regional and multilateral initiatives. So second, I wanted to point out, of course, to something that we are all connected to, and it's UN Tech Envoy and his program. We have not yet had him. we have not yet had a chance to get him here to give an overview, but I'm sure we will get there with together with Mei Lin. But it's also true that until the Digital Global Compact is being drafted, or let's say getting to a certain sort of framework or shape, he can also not provide that many details, but has pointed the three main priorities, and one of these is also the digital public infrastructure and digital public goods, which is a topic that we have been discussing, I think, increasingly throughout soon 1 year that I have been involved in this network, and I am looking at what is happening. I see it also being a trend for the future, and I believe that here it is also our task to make sure it will not become a replacement term or something that has been around for years, but it really holds to its core principles of openness and sharing and reusing and pooling resources. So this will be definitely something that we will be also looking at from our side, and the global compact is also important because it in a way gives a mandate or a framework for the tech envoy for the coming years. So I'm very much looking forward to this. I know that some consultations with some countries have already begun. Germany is supporting tech envoy's office with consultations in India, Kenya, Mexico, I believe also Argentina, but there is not that much we still know about it. And of course, I'm not going to talk about UN General Assembly. I think we had an overview of this on the 25th of October when I was missing, but I would like to draw I would say our attention to the Tallinn Digital Summit that has been the flagship project for Estonia and is now increasingly actually connected with a global gateway, which I believe is one of the biggest EU, I would say, in a way, trademark initiatives for digital cooperation. And it is another important milestone from the EU side to support what we would call trusted connectivity and digital transformation that is planned and implemented by partners that share our values in the global order. And finally, I will talk a bit about IGF. We cannot miss it unless, Marco, you will also, from your side, there was a session we also shared on GovStack and the public infrastructure. And then perhaps a few words about the event on the 1st of December. Of course, I cannot talk about on behalf of German Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, but I had the pleasure to be there as one of the partners for BMZ and GIZ. We do many things together. We are co-leading the e-government working group at D4D Hub. We are involved in several Team Europe initiatives, a data flagship project in Africa, Horn of Africa project, and recently there was also launched the Digital and Green Transition Initiative. I am personally very much also looking forward to the initiative that was launched by ITU together with BMZ, Equals, that looks at gender gap and is trying to bring in also the digital VIPs to this scene. I understand there is also a plan to have a sort of framework or a group of digital female and I will definitely follow, and in any way we can bring this initiative also to our network. I think it will be a great addition. But IGF was for me actually the first IGF to participate in 17 years. I was very glad to see many of you there also. I see Joseph here and some others, and it was a great event and a great venue, and also gave a good overview of the issues around digital transformation in African countries, because it's taking place in Addis Ababa. It naturally had, I would say, a very high African presence. I did not, of course, manage to see all the sessions. There will be, I believe, a summary of these made available on the IGF website, but I would say that internet fragmentation remains a big issue, but also internet shutdowns, not only because we were in Ethiopia that has cut off internet from many of its citizens on and off, even though it is fortunately a decreasing trend. But personally, I would have to congratulate the Prime Minister of Ethiopia for a very democratic and technologically strong speech. That I believe Ethiopia demonstrated a very strong digital agenda, but also a very strong understanding of the issues around digitalization, from polarization to misinformation, and also emphasizing on the needed collaboration and on the global collaboration to deal with these issues. I would perhaps not even take more of your time. Of course, we were involved from Estonian side in discussions around building trust and security, and also highlighting some of the issues we are currently seeing in the cyber sort of space taking place because of the war on Ukraine, where we can see that it's more and more civilians being attacked and influenced by the cyber attacks, not only government critical infrastructure or databases that used to be the case, let's say, some time back, which I think for us is a clear message that we all need to be digitally stronger. And this is definitely a takeaway from this current war. We have to make sure that our people know how to use digital tools well, that they use, for example, secure digital identity, not random PIN codes. And that also our government is ready to provide services under all circumstances. So this was one of our messages from at the IGF. But I would, before I give the floor actually to ITU, to Marco, I unfortunately need to again apologize that for having to leave 10-15 minutes earlier to host a dinner for our colleagues from Israel that are currently in Tallinn, and everybody is either sick or traveling. So there are some things, unfortunately, that come on our ways. But now, Marco, please. We are looking forward to the updates from ITU, and of course, feel free to also to comment any of my observations if you feel it's needed.
Thank you, Nele. Thanks a lot. Melin, should I go ahead? Do you want me to share the slide directly, or?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Please share the slides. Thank you.
So I have, okay. There you go. Okay, I hope you can see that. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So I'm trying to give just a little bit of an understanding of what we are doing. Okay, so just let me, there you go, that's better. no. So you see now the entire, or just the, how do you
It
see
was
the slide?
better. It was better before.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let me swap again. All right, that's good.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, just to give you a little bit of a flavor of our engagement, but again, you know, here everyone is connected to each other. So as Nelly was mentioning, you know, we were in the 1st December, you know, meeting in Germany. We were at the IGF. So let's back up each other here also, because Kesom is also coming after me from UNDP. We are working together with them, but just, you know, to cut it short. So there is a variety of engagement that the ITU is actually in. Of course, the Tech Envoy Office, Digital Cooperation Roadmap, IGF, we run in the WSIS Forum, as most of you know. There is a partnership for measurement, for measuring ICT for development, the UNSG, the Common Agenda, the UN data strategy process, the Broadband Commission. So all these mechanisms are in a way or another interacting to each other. And of course, with such certain difficulty, ITU is trying to cope with all this among us, you know, level of engagement and interaction. But we're trying also to give, you know, a fair contribution to all these different processes according to what we consider our own expertise and competency. So I have tried to distill a couple of examples where, specifically within the framework of the UN Digital Cooperation Roadmap, ITU is active, and of course not by itself, but mainly and thanks really to the other partners. One of which is, of course, the strong mandate that the cooperation roadmap gave to the ITU UNDP to actually lead the capacity building piece, the capacity development piece. So there we have actually achieved a few things. One was the, let's say, ongoing implementation and development of this construct, this concept of the joint facility for capacity development, which really aims to facilitate the matchmaking between demand and supply. This is something that ITU UNDP are working together as kind of harmonizing the offering and leveraging on the strengths of the two organizations. UNDP, of course, is much more present than us on the ground. They have an outreach which is phenomenal in terms of, you know, getting in touch with the community. ITU has a certain technical expertise and competence that can be made available. So we try to join forces and come out with an understanding of how we could really, let's say, link really what is available in terms of capacity development on digital and what is the demand on the other side. So we have put together a couple of tools. One was the database, kind of you know, point to have, you know, like a point as a reference for the users to access, you know, capacity development, let's say, initiative and courses. The other one was the kind of establishment of this multi-stakeholder network on capacity development, which was again another construct part of the digital cooperation roadmap. So we did that. We are hoping to hand this over to the Tech Envoy office once that the office itself becomes stable. Now, of course, the Tech Envoys as a person has been assigned, has been nominated. So now they are, of course, catching up on the all different operations. So that's something that we are carrying on doing. So as I said, you know, we had developed also a navigator for civil servant to identify relevant courses. All this is on digitalcapacity.org. There is a website that is, I can send you the link, that there is basically the main reference of our work, I mean, ITU UNDP work on capacity development. Another piece of work that we are doing together with UNDP, but not only, also with other organizations, and again, driven by the Tech Envoy office, was to try to have access to the joint SDG fund. So there is a fund that has been made available through financial support from the EU, from the European Union, and from the Commission on some of the digital elements, namely the digital transformation piece. So we have been working with the Tech Envoy office to come out with an understanding of how, you know, the UN system as a whole, but and again, mainly driven by ITU UNDP, can actually make use of the financial resources available to facilitate facilitate capacity development. So there is a piece of capacity development there, but widely it's more related to how we can, you know, support digital transformation at the country level. So the work is in progress there. As you might know, the funds as what they call windows, so windows of opportunity where, you know, organization can actually, you know, propose, you know, a pieces of work, and then the window is basically the time frame and the amount of funds that can be made available. Yeah, so that's another piece that I'm sure Kaison can possibly comment after me. Another piece of work, again, related to digital cooperation roadmap, was on the connectivity piece, and that the main initiative was a GIGA initiative, which is mainly a ITU UNICEF effort to try to connect all the schools in the world. That is the ambition, right? And the idea was to do the mapping exercise before to understand where the schools are and then bring the connectivity element into it. So basically, let's say, facilitate connectivity of school to the net. Yeah, and that goes back to what Nele was saying in terms of digital gap, in terms of digital divide, and in terms of, you know, making sure that we actually go into let's say, meaningful connectivity for all. So a couple of results here. We had mapped the location of more or less 2 million schools in 50 countries. We are working with 19 countries, you know, in different regions, and at the moment we have connected around 5,000 schools, right? And then there is a recent update, again, through funding from Spain and Switzerland. The GIGA initiative is actually having a physical premise, if you want. So there is a technology center that is being established in Barcelona, yeah, through funding from Spain. So this is work in progress. We had the first retreat last week with UNICEF and of course with Spain as an administration, and we are going to build this center to facilitate further deployment of GIGA. Then there is another piece which was done with the Tech Envoy office and with okay, that's UNOHRLLS, which is basically the office that is dealing with least developed countries and seeds and yeah, basically with LDCs. So we launched an idea of trying to, again, stimulate and mobilize resources from the community at large, mainly industry and of course also national administration. So this translated into the Partner to Connect initiative that was launched at the beginning of 2021. Again, the idea was to try to have pledges, so commitments from, let's say, different entities, whether it's a national administration or an industry player or, you know, any other entity that has a say in digital, and try to come out with the platform that could aggregate all this commitment to be then mapped into the work that the UN system and other entities are doing. So to give a little bit more value in the work that has been done at the country level. So at the moment, I think, yeah, we have 500 pledges valued around $29 billion. And of course, we are going to start having an understanding of how these pledges are going in terms of implementation. And that goes back to what me and Joseph, we were talking about. So there will be a small event Thursday, so the 8th, where, you know, we have invited all the pledgers to report back on the work that has been done up to today. On artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, there is a piece that we are carrying on with UNESCO. So with UNESCO, we are co-chairing an interagency working group on AI, and this partnership generated, let's say, a interagency strategy. So basically a UN strategy on AI, namely to try to understand how, let's say, UN makes sense of artificial intelligence as a technology domain and how we could leverage, you know, the possible potentials. Yeah. So this is work in progress, and of course we have been part of also on the stream on the digital cooperation roadmap on AI. On cyber, again, there have been lots of discussion within the high level, let's say, panels on digital cooperation. Also, there is a reflection into the roadmap itself. From our side, we are of course engaged with the disarmament affairs. and also with some other institution and entities within the UN. A couple of I put a couple of references in terms of the WSIS forum that is also looking at this, and also on the AI for Good Summit, which is one of the main let's say events that we organize on AI. On statistics, I think that's interesting because that's one of the most, let's say, concrete products that we have done together with, again, with the other UN agencies, with the Tech Envoy office. There was a request from, well, there was a, like, you know, a demand from the roadmap in coming out with a possible way to measure connectivity, right? And then ITU has long, let's say, experience organization on indicators and on statistics, took the, let's say, the task to work on coming out with a statistical framework on how we can measure meaningful connectivity. Now, that might mean everything, might mean nothing, but we have tried to come out with an understanding of how an indicator can be identified and how we can measure on that. The idea was, again, to try to measure and to give a little bit of indication on how we should prioritize the intervention to be done at the country level, how we can monitor progress in terms of connectivity, and how we can, let's say, understand if intervention at the policy level can generate really a behavioral change at the country level. So these are the kind of aspirational targets that were agreed by a wider group. Of course, we facilitated the conversation there, and then we identified the different pieces. So from the universality, the technology, the affordability, and then the idea was to kind of identify targets against which, let's say, the work has to be done, and then how we could even measure that. So there is actually a paper that was made available to the Tech Envoy office. It was distributed to all the different entities on the, participating in the roadmap that are part of the roadmap itself. Maybe a couple of words on the, I cannot talk about the IGF a lot because I still need to get, you know, a little bit of an understanding from Doreen because she was there full time. But on the Germany event, as you were mentioning, Nele, there was a very good interaction with BMZ, which is the Ministry of ICT in a sense. And of course with GIZ, because GIZ is one of the main, let's say, well, was the organizer, but also is supporting a lot ITU, and I'm sure not only ITU, all the other, so some other UN agencies. But there was a very good conversation with the ministry, which is a woman, and that's why I think you raised the issue about gender, because Equal is an initiative that ITU has launched some time ago, but I think Germany picked this up, and I mean, the German minister want to use that to kind of launch the concept of having, you know, let's say, leaders, of course, women leaders like yourself, I would say, that would, let's say, drive and shape a little bit the conversation on how, you know, gender divide can be mitigated, and how, you know, we could actually really strengthen, you know, the obvious saying in having equality, you know, across the board. So the idea was to launch this kind of a network of ministers, or network of VIPs, as we want to call it, or network of basically leaders, you know, that could, again, help in that. And I think I can take the liberty to actually, you know, link you up with Doreen, because I think that, that you will be one of the, if you want, you will be one of the members of this network, because I think you have been really instrumental to shape the conversation within this platform, but also with others. So unless you already are in touch with her, but I would be more than happy to do that, and then maybe we can start building the network. And so that was one of the very good results. And then, of course, within the GovStack context, we are advancing the conversation with GIZ and Germany. Germany is very keen to support, you know, digital, generally speaking, but also the UN system. So of course we are trying to see how we can assist on that. So there were very good conversation on with the German government, you know. And but again, as you said, one of the main let's say outcomes was to really try to focus more and more on gender, and I think Germany is really aligned on this. I would stop here, and you know, again, we can carry on interacting, you know, and the slides, of course, are available. And if you have additional things to ask or to, you know, or to get clarification on, I'm more than happy. Last slide is about, you know, a little bit of an understanding and analysis. You know, we are still seeing lots of challenges in terms of, you know, understanding, you know, where we come from. Let's put it this way, you know. Of course, funding resources is one issue, but we are seeing that if we come united, and there was a good example, and I'm sure Kezon can talk about that on, you know, let's say, jointly propose, you know, something on capacity development, for example, to EU, and then actually was very well received. So I think there is a certain value in going together, but still, you know, it's difficult to try to make sense of what each other is doing and how, you know, we could really harmonize and we could really, you know, put aside a little bit, you know, personal and organizational interest vis-a-vis to the greater good, you know, and that's something that we are learning. I mean, every one of us, but we are still, there is still a certain you know, lack of understanding, which I'm sure that through through platforms like this one, I mean, can be clarified. Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that you know, I at least point out on a couple of challenges. Thank you. Stop sharing now. There you go.
Thank you, Marco. I have just one follow-up question. Perhaps also some others are interested in the event that you are hosting on the, I think, 8th of December. Is it also possible on Partner to Connect initiative? Is it also possible to see it online, or is it okay?
Mm-hmm. I can share the link, so then everyone is interested, you know, and please feel free to circulate. It's an hybrid event, so on site and of course online also. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The event on, I believe, on Thursday, right, had also quite a bit of GovStack discussions at that initiative of Germany, ITU, Estonia, and Ireland. There were some announcements also made around it, but USAID and Ukraine, but also Norway joining as partners of the initiative. But I believe that maybe we can have, you know, a next session and a GovStack update, as there have been actually quite many developments.
So I think for the sake of time, I would agree with you, Nele. I think maybe we can have a little bit of time next session. I mean, by chance, there is, I think he's still connected. There is Yolanda, which is a colleague from the ITU here, which is really the lead on GovStack. So up to you, Nele and Melin, if you want to maybe, you know, ask additional question or having, you know, a little 2 minutes intervention from Yolanda, we'll be more than happy to provide. Otherwise, we can do the next time, and maybe we can have a little bit more, you know, allocated time to discuss more about GovStack, because there are developments, as you said, you know, other organizations are joining, and I think it's becoming a really, really nice movement to see. So, I mean, we are available either today or next week or next time, as you prefer.
I think it'd be great to do it next time. So Yolanda will organize with you. Back to you, Nelly. Thank you, Marco.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. We will now hear from UNDP on the updates. Okay, so Mayu.
Yes, indeed. Hello. Hi,
Hello.
Nelly. How are you?
Hi. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, and nice to see you, Mei Ling, and all the colleagues online. Thank you for having us. You know, I'm just actually, we've heard about Germany's great digital event from Marco and Nele both. I'm also just back from India as part of our G20 engagements as India takes over the presidency. And then that was followed by a visit in Berlin, where we saw the great leadership, as you heard from Marco and Nele, of Minister Schwenzer-Schulze, which I hope we'll hear more about later today. But really building on what Marco just shared in terms of digital cooperation, I wanted to try to end this year with a high note on digital cooperation updates in 4 areas. The first one is around climate data exchanges to meet the Paris Climate Accord following COP26, where the UN and many of our partners support the countries that have committed to this agreement. The second area is looking at social protections, digital public infrastructure, pivoting to a partnership model with tech communities in across 80 countries. The third area that I want to speak about today is the G20 and India's intent to rise above geopolitics, as we've heard Nelly speak to create the collective spaces for global digital commons to especially support low middle income countries. And then lastly, the opportunity that we have with the African Union's Continental Free Trade Agreement and One Market aspirations that has the potential to lift 30 million micro small businesses, many women-led, become much more resilient. With this to the next slide, we know as we've seen through this year, especially as you've heard about the UNGA updates from many of our members here, digital public infrastructure is critically important for transformation for the future of countries, particularly as we speak about both the acceleration of the Sustainable Development Goals as well as digital sovereignty. So making sure we do it right is important, and making sure that we're building out these platforms or solutions or digital public goods in terms of thematic spaces is even more important. And some of those examples I will talk through today, but the top line message is that we really need to get those constituents pieces together and right. And for us at the UN, ITU, UNDP, the Office of the Tech Envoy, UNICEF, etc., an inclusive digital public infrastructure approach is not just about technology, but also about the non-technology layers of governance, of the community engagement that together is going to influence how much of the underlying infrastructure or the digital commons or the public rails will drive the overall societal well-being and the achievement of this SDGs. And the sort of approach to inclusive DPI directly responds to the shift in digital development that we've seen since COVID, which is basically moving from digital solutions to digital ecosystems and how solutions interact and interop with each other, from a fragmented approach to a much more holistic whole of society approach, and from techno-optimism to a rights-based and inclusion-first approach where we are having a number of conversations with UNHCR and others within the UN system on, what is the context of human rights in a new digital context, and might we need to look at the Human Rights Declaration, which was created during the industrial age in reflecting more of its protection and achievement during the digital age that we are in. Moving to the next slide, our first kind of deep dive here for discussion today is, if we look at the climate space, we know that without transparency and cooperation, we cannot win the global fight against climate change. We know that 193 parties have committed to nationally determined contributions, which are known as NDCs as part of the Paris Agreement, but there's no common system of measurement, reporting, and verification of progress. And time again, especially for UNDP and other UN agencies working with governments in the countries, we know that collecting and managing data on sources of emission, comparing it against targets, reporting the results, and analyzing the trends is extremely challenging. Many countries lack the capacity or the resources to undertake such processes. And for those that do, they tend to develop their systems in silo, making it difficult to get a global snapshot of our collective progress. So as we at UNDP directly support 120 countries through the Climate Promise to build transparency capacity and establish carbon trading mechanisms, we are partnering with the World Bank, UNFCCC, countries and tech communities to mainstream digital public good that will form part of the climate stack across the portfolio. Basically, it's about tackling the collective action problem to climate change by open sourcing the code base of the monitoring and reporting verification systems and the national carbon registries as digital public goods, and creating an open central code base that countries can adapt and leverage, because ultimately the systems that each country has to stand up is very similar to one another, so that we may start seeing a global data exchange on climate reporting, and really sort of spur action across a number of stakeholders to climate change and achieve the SDGs. If we go to the next slide, another sector that we are seeing accelerated digital cooperation among countries, tech communities, and the UN is in the space of social protection, or government to people benefits transfer. And during crisis, you will be all familiar with this. We often see the same problems. Significant numbers of people that are not part of the social cash transfer infrastructure in countries, and they can include migrants, informal workers, and refugees. We see an increase in poverty due to wage loss, or increased expenses such as on health with many newly poor people. And then we also see at the same time that despite our 50 years of development assistance, whether it's bilaterals or multilaterals, limited digital infrastructure and capabilities to use tools such as beneficiary management systems, identity, payments infrastructure, incapable of serving portions of the population in a targeted and timely manner. And that, of course, exacerbates economic and social impact on the vulnerable, and especially women. So together with a number of partners, including GovStack and many others, GDP Connect is a solution blueprint that offers a reusable technology stack, including an end-to-end integrated solution blueprint for any kind of government service delivery. And it is accompanied by an operational deployment kit that allows many governments to rapidly launch and scale across multiple departments in their country digitally and efficiently. The next example is actually about the India's G20 presidency, where we are seeing digital public infrastructure emerging as a key accelerator for the SDGs. And as I was there in Delhi a week before last, I was thinking about when the UN system was created, much of the multilateral organizations, including the UN, they were we were set up during following World War II. And it was really to sort of make progress on better living standards and human rights. But if we fast forward to today with 193 member states, the world, as we know, has changed significantly. Progress has new context, a digital context, where we need stronger collaboration among member states, among the private sector, with the private sector, as Nelly spoke about. And we need to work together to establish the digital commons or collective action that can drive forward shared values, service delivery, and really look at the SDGs as our guiding North Star. But, as Nelly also spoke about, digital commons is not a neutral terminology. It's embedded deep in geopolitics and local contexts. And it also brings into sharp focus issues of sovereignty and control, who ultimately controls public infrastructure, how will digital cooperation move forward in complex geopolitics. And I think these are important questions that we're starting to discuss in the context of India's G20 presidency, because India sits in this unique opportunity to shape the global agenda, both as a principal player as well as a model for others. And it was because of India's participation in the high-level panel on digital cooperation convened by RSG in 2018 that the word digital public goods entered the global vocabulary and got defined. And it's the tremendous leadership with Norway, Sierra Leone, UNICEF, and many others that the Digital Public Goods Alliance was set up, of which, of course, as UNDP, we have the privilege to co-host. And we're really seeing for the first time leaders in countries across different sectors coming together with a sense of shared purpose and starting to discuss what is the governance architecture and the new institutions that are going to be required to both ensure that global digital commons are built around people and its political use as a tool during war and geopolitics is mitigated. So up until I think a few years ago, every country in the global south was speaking about development in their own countries. But today, countries like Rwanda, Germany, Estonia, India are coming together to speak about the world, because public infrastructure in one country can impact the global digital commons. And I believe that's a real opportunity that we have as we move forward. And then the last example that I want to draw our attention to is the opportunity for digital cooperation with the African Union to support their goals for creating the One African Market, where as I mentioned before, 30 million people, including many of the micro small businesses, can become much more resilient through greater trade and livelihood opportunities if we can support in enabling cross-border integrations of digital public infrastructure, and that includes ID, payments, and data exchanges. So this is, I think, a bit of a highlight at the end of the year from UNDP. Really great to be here with the partners. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kaysom. Actually, on the 1st of December event, there were also big steps taken towards, I would say, green and digital, or the twin transition that is a priority for many. And among others, there was also a Team Europe initiative launched, where currently there are also partners from Sweden, Finland, Estonia, Germany, and many others. So it could be also something that you could also see collaboration, because indeed, digital public infrastructure becoming a new sort of buzzword. There are so many different projects and initiatives on this topic. So so there is also a question, or has been raised, on how to align some of these things. So I believe that we can also facilitate some contacts around this Team Europe initiative also for you and many others. I think we don't have that much time, so we can leave some of the discussions around the public infrastructure perhaps to that session when we have also GovStack and some others as we are also part of it, and little bit see this happening, that there is a hope that this open source reusable technology will solve our digitalization issues, which is coming from Estonia, which, as you also mentioned, has been one of these reference countries. I can definitely guarantee that it's actually a very small part of making things happen. So I think countries that have money buy commercial solutions, countries don't have, buy maybe not so fancy commercial solutions. Some get it for free, but it's not what makes it happen. So I believe we can also not forget this about open source solutions. It does have its positive sides, but it's definitely not a remedy to all our issues. So I'm very much looking forward to this discussion, and I know that Chris is. Yes, I already see you. So Chrissy from the Digital Public Goods Charter will give updates actually on one of the initiatives around the public infrastructure that in a way started around a year ago, or maybe a little bit more. So I'm also looking forward to hear what has been taking place.
Great, thank you so much. Can everyone hear me and see the slides? Okay.
Yes.
I will keep this relatively quick. I understand that there has been a presentation on the charter before in this group, so I don't want to be too repetitive, but I would like to level set, and we have, evolved, really kind of refined the focus in the past several months. I came on board in early June. I am working on behalf of both DIAL and DPGA, who are co-leads of the Digital Public Goods Charter as an initiative, and also with the support of GIZ, Gates Foundation, USAID, and others. And this is also, very much seen as part of the Global Digital Compact, and DIAL actually committed to the P2C initiative that they would generate endorsements towards the charter. So aligned with P2C as well. So I will be in Geneva. I live in Switzerland, so it's convenient, but I will be there on Thursday. So I look forward to seeing some of you there. So I just made this slide today to be very kind of clear as to where we are. So the DPG charter, it's both a document and a campaign. As a document and an advocacy campaign, it exists to amplify existing global efforts. So to Nelly's point, there's a lot going on, and we want to make it very clear that this is not another project. We have no activities that are, on the ground or kind of implementing new things, but it's very much an advocacy campaign that's trying to celebrate this message of making digital public goods a more viable option to digital public infrastructure. So Nelly's intro or last comment was a great intro to this. It's a recognition that there's a lot of potential for digital public goods. We're hearing a lot of governments say very clearly, we want to be able to create our own future. We want to be able to own our own technology and customize it. But we also know that there are a lot of challenges with the market for digital public goods as it is. And so that's what we've outlined in the charter document, is a commitment framework that outlines at a very high level where actors should be focusing should they want to really support this kind of open source DPGs for DPI space. Dial in partnership with DPGA and all the others, UNDP, UNICEF that I already mentioned, ran a large number of consultations, trying to get a very global reach. And we collected, summarized those consultations, talking to experts in the field and government officials as to what they see as the need to really make digital public goods a trusted, sustainable part of the DPI kind of market ecosystem. So we came up out of this with, and I apologize, my 6-year-old is in the background, so you might hear him. It's evening here in Switzerland. So we came up with 5 key outcomes that if we really, in the next decade, by 2030, can see governments having full confidence in these digital public goods, there will be a larger number of discoverable products, right, supported by qualified vendors. Governments and local private sector will have the capacity they need to manage these products and really implement them. So with sufficient funding and technical assistance that align with their national strategies. So there will be a strong focus on safeguards and inclusion that really makes sure that DPI is in place to empower rather than suppress. And a strong ecosystem, kind of extended ecosystem that includes associations, think tanks, accelerators, multilaterals that are funded and have the capacity to help to coordinate and safeguard digital public goods. So we're currently generating endorsements for the charter. So again, as an advocacy campaign, what we it's a time-bound effort. We will wrap up by June. So we have the document now. We hope the document will exist and be a relevant reference for stakeholders from years to come. But we will wrap up this kind of advocacy push within the next 6 months, 7 months. And the idea there is to really create a lot of excitement, celebration of the various entities that are really dedicated to this vision. So we have 12 endorsers to date. I can switch the slides. A number of other supporters that have helped us along the way and even helped to envision this, but kind of those that have actually said that they endorse include the governments of Germany, Norway, Sweden, Togo, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, Uganda, Bangladesh. And then we're starting to reach out more to civil society organizations. So we've now brought on Digital Square and the Better Than Cash Alliance. So getting into some of those sectorial use cases that Kazam outlined very well. So that's about it for me. We would love your help, your ideas on how to generate more endorsements. Some of you on the call have heard from me, a few times on this. Again, many of you have been supportive with that. Actually, getting down to the endorsement email, but it's really a low-hanging fruit. It's not. we're not replicating the Digital Public Goods Alliance to DPGA, which is a long-term commitment. You do your roadmap activities, you join the working groups, or there's a lot that goes on for those DPGA members and a lot of benefit they get out of this, out of that membership. For the charter endorsement, it's really a way to just get the message out there. So there's very little kind of paperwork involved. But I think that's it for me, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks so much.
I have a question, Chrissy.
Yes, please.
Just wondering about private sector outreach.
Absolutely.
What's the stance on that?
Yeah, the core partners had set forth governments and donors as the primary target for endorsements. We are very interested in bringing the private sector on. So we've had very extensive and robust conversations with actors like IBM, Red Hat, and Microsoft who were involved in that consultation phase. And we'll be following up with them to see if they would like to endorse. So very much a key part of it. And we are happy to hear from at least the three that I named that that they're very much aligned with this vision. I think that there was some concern that it might feel like we were competing against those companies, but I think that they see that their future is not in providing these kind of software platforms, and that they're happy to support the effort. So we did use a lot of their content in developing the charter document itself. The Salesforce as well, we spoke to. Yeah.
I see that Gora would like.
Yes, sure.
Oh.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Thank you, Chrissy, for the excellent overview. Besides Maylin's question, which was also one of my questions, but the second one is, what role are the standards organization playing in this? Are they involved actively at this stage, or can you talk a little bit about that?
No, they haven't been. I think that this is very much at a much higher level than the specific standards, but certainly an audience that we'd love to engage, especially as we start to think about what does that feature post June look like, which we will probably start having those conversations throughout January or February. So happy to hear from you how we should be engaging with the standard setting bodies.
Sure. I mean, there are two organizations which come to mind immediately at a very global level, ISO being one of them, the International Standards Organization itself, and IEEE. These are two large global organizations which have footprints across all nations. And there are many more, but these are two real big ones. And I can happy to follow up more. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think it was also a question we would need to at some point ask also as GovStack members, where do we go with this? So I'm happy this came out. Unless there are any other questions to Chrissy on this public good charter and the works they have been doing, I have a pleasure of giving the floor to May-Lin, and I apologize, Joseph, in advance if I'm going to miss some of your presentation on internet in Africa, but I'm sure that you, having been present also in the IGF and being very well acquainted with the public infrastructure and goods work, can also comment on some of what we have been discussing or how you have seen it. But before that, I would give it to May-Lin on the WSIS organization update.
Great. Hi, everyone. I had the pleasure to be nominated for the UN Women Commission on the Status of Women report for 2023. I am the co-chair for Asia Pacific, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And we have developed recommendations for that report, which is on the theme of digital innovation, which I presume is why I was invited. That really gave me some much greater insight on the gender lens for development. And this was reinforced by a recent visit that I made to GIZ in Bonn, Germany, where I got acquainted with the idea of the what has been announced December 1st, that the women ministers and a circle of prominent women, including Doreen Bogdan-Martin, looking at how we might have this gender lens. So inspired by all of that, at the Internet Governance Forum, I was the closing speaker for the open consultation process, introducing that there would be an open consultation process for developing the panels for WSIS, the World Summit on the Information Society, which will be held in March of next year. And so I wanted to share the talk that I gave, and Schneider, our PCI host, will be showing that video. I'm the chair of the People-Centered Internet and a proud WSIS gender trendsetter, but I'm also the godmother of CRM, the customer relationship management. So I've been in technology, they call me old school tech. I chair the IEEE Society for the Social Implications of Technology, Technical Committee for Sustainability. And recently I co-chaired the UN Commission on the Status of Women's 67th session on the theme of digital innovation. I want to focus my remarks on where women can play a role. Digital affects workplaces, homes, sports, social life. It's coming into every aspect of human life for those who can afford it. And for those who cannot, the digital divide must be bridged, or sectors of society will not be full participants in the future, and with the possibility of future social unrest. With all these opportunities and dangers that we face, what can we do? A renowned leader said at the time of the most severe crisis his country had faced, a civil war, this is what he said: we can succeed only by concert. It is not, can any of us imagine better, but can we all do better? The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew, said Abraham Lincoln in 1861. We have to go beyond acknowledging that women have an important role to play in shaping the future. We are 50% of humanity. Women can drive the setting up of future frameworks for digital innovation. With a woman as the first ITU Secretary General to be a woman, bravo, Doreen Bogdan-Martin, we can rise to this occasion and demand that digital serves humanity and stewards the planet. Physics as a science needed physics labs. So digital needs labs for developing policy, for developing collaborative regulation that serves the people and the planet. So what kind of labs are we talking about? Community living learning labs, so we can begin to understand the consequences and long-term impact of digital interventions and digital innovations. We need, as the Secretary General of the United Nations said, we have to harness the power of digital technologies, but we have to minimize the harms. We have to do this systematically, collaboratively, in a coordinated way. We need to call for regional collaboration on regulatory sandboxes for digital. Each country is dealing with their own election cycles, but if we have regional sandboxes, this effort can continue to do these labs even as different elected officials move through. So we must do this with participation by all, using technology like conversational AI, not to automate existing jobs, but to do the jobs that have never been done, that need to be done, to get direct real-time feedback from the people so that we continually improve our designs, our processes, our policies, and our regulations. This is what the tech companies are doing. They're doing it at speed and scale, and we must do it for our policies and regulations. only then can we make sure that digital innovation is for the people, by the people, and with the people. Hi, I was very tired because it was 2 a.m. in the morning when I gave that talk. But as you can see, I brought in the idea of regional collaboration on regulation, which is a topic that the ITU and the World Bank have been working on for the last 5 years. And it's described in the website digitalregulation.org. So I'm bringing this up in this session to make clear that as we talk about Partner to Connect and digital public, the charter, as well as digital public infrastructure, the role of regional collaboration on regulation is essential because the private sector is very, very hesitant to get involved unless we have clarity on the regulatory sandbox to allow them to go beyond the rules that were set for health, for transportation, for housing. In the olden days, the pre-digital days, the regulations were set. And so how can they all coordinate in order to meet the needs of a citizen who is in fact having to deal with all of these regulations and the inability for all the services to coordinate. So that's my call to action, and I hope that it was helpful for those who heard it, and I will turn it back to Nelly.
Thank you, Melin. I think it takes us back to the very beginning of our discussion, like how we see actually the private sector, and I believe it has also, as many other things in the current world, taken us to a quite polarized sides. We in Europe tend to think, and I personally necessarily do not agree with this, that the regulations are needed in order to innovate. But how we do that is now a question, and oftentimes we do not really know how to regulate in a way that, on the one hand, we can still count on technological innovation and partnerships that we all need. Also, the governments to digitalize, actually, because the people that we are in a way serving from government are all the users of the products from the big tech companies, and coming from Estonia, we know very well what it takes to negotiate with big tech to make sure that your architecture is interoperable with theirs, and when you have an EID update, that it definitely works with Apple and all the other devices. But it's but you are also pointing rightly to the I would say a variety of regulations, and there the tech companies are somehow stuck in the middle and do not really know. And I think one of the takeaways from IGF definitely was that there is really a push for a need for some global principles also, in addition to the existing regulatory framework. For example, when it comes to the sharing of data across borders, and I believe actually Japan has here very good exercise and some lessons learned from their data flows with trust initiative, where they really try to put some global framework or principles for data sharing, apart from these differences in regulations. So I think it's something that we can definitely take on board for the future. If nobody has any questions to Melin or comments. and I don't see any hands. Then I would hand it over to Joseph, and then I will kindly ask Meilin to follow up and close, and we will see again in January. So Joseph, please. I think you have to unmute.
Sorry for the unmute. Yes, I have the pleasure of working with colleagues or communities in 14 countries in Africa. So I wanna put a bit of a questions out to what is connectivity in Africa. And you see it on this slide. I printed Norway, which is a big country when it comes to coastline, 25,000 kilometers. But when it comes to size as compared to Africa, it's about nothing. So when we bring the Nordic perspective out, and that is really the perspective of how digitization has helped us in Norway and the Nordics and Baltics to get across. And that started back in '73 when Wind put on a slide here, the slide from '72, Europe as the connectivity, and connected our building at Kjeller with the internet. And then Jon van Tetschen gave us, he built Opera software. And then at one point in time, we've seen that if we don't do anything, then connecting the unconnected or connecting the future was really the stuff. And I have the pleasure of kicking out Paul Spilling from his office. He was together with Ingvar Lund and Wind, the godfathers of the TCP/IP protocol, which every one of us is using. So with that background, I'm really out there and questioning how is the internet developing. And I had the pleasure discussing with Ho Lin Sao at the WSIS forum whether the internet will really reach everyone in Africa. And the result is that I don't believe when he says that, well, you know, Guterres asked me whether we have connected everyone by 2030, because I still believe that that we see the same trend as we see in energy, where basically we have still about 680 million people by 2030 which are unconnected, and that is about I don't know where the number will be, but we've seen that we failed to connect people. We see an increase to use of Facebook and WhatsApp, and I'm asking whether that is the internet we talk about. So having put the question out, I actually say that today's internet failed to connect the unconnected. And I'm repeating the words from Kate Gilmore, who was United Nations Ambassador for Human Rights in the digital age back in 2017, when she said, internet had the ability to dismantle the divide. Internet failed miserably. The divide is bigger than ever. And my question is really, when we talk about digital public goods, when we talk about the DPGs, when we talk about DPIs, whether we'll really have the chance of bringing the access, solving the access question. To give you again this comparison, is that when you look at the little bit of Norway, then we have about we had about 20,000 base stations in 2019 to cover the country. Now that gives you an impression of how many base stations we would actually need. And what we see is that in the Western world, and I'm taking here the examples from Norway, we pay around $45 for the fixed access at home and another $20 to $30 for the mobile access. Now, when I look into the large distances in Africa, I really don't see how we can bring cheap infrastructures out, because the distances are so tremendously large. And that means what we experience with our community networks in Ghana and other places is that $100 for a 1 megabit per second line is isn't that big off. We were able to do something with the prices, but it's really like the fixed broadband. I don't see it coming because the access will be through the mobile network, and in addition, we have the ability to pay. Giving these ones, we've really, from the academia, we've asked ourselves, what if we revisit access, we decentralize the internet, and we use university to connect? And my example, which I'm discussing with Mylene all the time, is when we talk about digital public goods, when we talk about a GovStack, X-Roads, then we need to talk about whether we can build a layer on the internet where we get an access to this basic type of services. And the example which I always use is saying that, well, on the road model, we know that pedestrians and cyclists can use the roads for free. And if we translate that to digital, are that really the digital pedestrians? Can we define digital pedestrians and cyclists to actually have the access to the digital public goods and the GovStack and the services on health, on education? So having said that, the second part is really to revisit the universities. And to revisit the universities, let me tell you a bit of our approach of connecting schools, which is like we built at universities in Africa with our partners, what we call the regional competence centers, where we use students and train students to get the knowledge of access. And with that access, we send them out and let them connect schools. And what we are discussing now is whether we can't put a bit higher focus on all the national research and education networks, the NRENs, being it Ubuntu Net Alliance, VACREN, ASREN, or GIANT, where it's really about the attempt by first connecting the universities, and from the universities connecting the schools. And one of the discussions we have currently with Vodacom in Tanzania and in Ethiopia is whether we shouldn't use 5G technologies to actually connect down to schools using the multi-MIMO. And from there on, and that is the add-on which I would love to bring across, is giving the gender discussion, giving that boys have the toys and boys pay the dollar for, let me be rude here, for sex and drugs and rock and roll. That means 2 out of the 3 things, device, costs for access, and skills, are in favor of the boys or in disfavor of the girls. And that means we need to talk about how we can introduce centers for women, for learning, and getting experiences on health, like the small videos here, which we had experienced with bringing health information to rural Tanzania. And I was lucky yesterday, I was invited yesterday to join the Human Rights Prize of the University of Oslo, given to Andrea Peteux, to actually stand up for the European values in higher education. And as part of that discussion, we had like the so-called standards and guidelines for quality assurance in the European higher education area. So it's not only United Nations and ITU who have complex names, universities also know how to challenge each and every one. And in this one, there were 4 important fundamental values mentioned. And I only want to concentrate on the last one, on the public responsibility for and of the higher educations. And that one was so much stressed out in terms of we as universities want to contribute to our societies. Thus, the whole concept of connecting societies, on empowering societies, is well achieved. So in conclusion, to have hopefully time for some questions, in the Partnership for Connectivity, we really see that the universities gain by real world knowledge, that they can help us to build a decentralized internet. because at the end of the day, to have this information spots at universities, at schools, to help with knowledge for Africa and 5G for the people, that is the approach which we could bring across. And then having the community learning and living labs, where we pave the way from NRENs to school to the community learning and living labs. And what we've seen in the discussions is that the operators in Africa are extremely positive to actually go together and do some more research on how good is 5G used or could be used for connecting schools. And the last but not least is always the discussion we have on the framework conditions. What about spectrum? What about if the universities own some of the spectrum to actually be able to connect? Or what about the framework conditions for the access to the digital public goods and the GovStack? I close here. If you have any questions, please join us on our trip to connect more schools. We are not competing to GIGA. We have a perfectly collaboration with GIGA, though we are often driven that the communities ask us, hey, I don't want to wait until GIGA comes to Tanzania. Can you help in connecting schools right now? So it's the top up, bottom up, and the top down approach which we are following. Thanks everyone for joining.
So I have a question, Joseph. How are you collaborating with other countries from Norway, both in the EU, but also in the rest of the world? Besides the actual work in Africa, how is the collaboration to do the work in Africa happening?
Yeah, what we do from the university networks is that we basically establish the competence for bringing the knowledge on connectivity, on how to establish web pages, on content out to our university partners and train them to build these regional competence centers, such that these centers can be like the second line of support. Now, when you say Norway, the picture is a lot bigger, because Norway is A, supporting the Digital Public Goods Alliance, B, Norway is supporting the digital transformation centers, and thus Norway is what I would say. Norway supports a lot the international organization. Thus, Norway doesn't go directly into the countries, but rather does it through the help of the DPGs and the GovStacks alikes and the DTCs.
Thank you, Joseph. Gora, please.
Sure. Thanks, Joseph. Good to see you again. Thank you for the excellent presentation. Besides my standard question about standards involvement, but the one we really wanted to ask you here is this whole future workforce and the skills required, the impact of emerging tech. I really didn't hear much from you on the specificity. Would like to discuss a little bit?
Yeah, there are 2 points. The first one is on the standards, Gora, where actually we have the next generation roadmap discussion at IEEE, where we have the working item on the connect the unconnected, where we look into what are potential standards. And there is every year there is this competition led by IEEE on prices for connecting the unconnected. So that one is fine. About the second part, give me a keyword again. Sorry.
The future workforce development, emerging tech.
Yeah, on the future workforce, one of the big challenges which we see is actually, though students are educated in Python, in app development, in something, when they get out, their knowledge doesn't find the ecosystem. And the ecosystem isn't there because the number of people with access, with smartphones, isn't good enough developed. So that is one of the reasons why we believe that together with Mylin and our partners, that we need to build this every village gets a community learning living labs to actually see that, hey, here you can have the services, and this is the starting point for the empowerment. Because we see that the telecoms, it's not their job to educate people. That's a job which both the schools and we and everyone else in the community has to do.
So a follow-up question I have is, in one of the earlier presentation, there was the statistics about connecting the schools globally, whereas education is no longer delivered only in the schools. So I was actually a little disturbed seeing that emphasis there, because you're not looking at the future, you're really looking at the past if you're looking to connect schools to educate. Maybe I'm being too optimistic here, but your thoughts?
No, of course, I mean, the focus on the schools is a focus triggered by the SDG 4A, which is the reporting from the governments of how many schools are connected, how many people are connected through the schools. So that is the direct driver. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the people not being in school, how can we reach that? And that is one of the things where we we have so many women who haven't had the chance of being at school, but whom we hope that we still can meet them through this community learning living labs, because we really need this emphasis on why are these women left alone? It's not only the devices, but they also don't see why they should spend $1 on the access. So how we could grab them, I still believe that is where the communities come in, and where the communities have asked us to help them to connect.
I think the other point which I'm really making is, you no longer go to school to get educated, which was the model of the past. Now you get educated through the mobile device you have and many other means. So we have to think beyond just how can you connect the schools and deliver the knowledge through the schools only.
I want to challenge you, Gora, because I have this ongoing discussion with Vodacom Foundation in Tanzania. And when I get the feedback from them saying that 75 to 80% of all connections are 2G based in the Vodacom network in Tanzania. And that includes Dar es Salaam, that includes Arusha, that includes the big cities. 75 to 80%, which basically means that when you go out to rural areas, you may have 1, 2, 3% who go in through 3G or 4G phones, smartphones. And that is actually this mismatch. I think we have still a way to go to enable access to other means.
No, I'm completely in agreement with you. It's sort of switch we can flip that tomorrow everybody's well connected. So it is definitely a pathway, roadmap here to work. But the point we are really making is we have to think beyond that. The knowledge and education is delivered only at the schools. And that's the part which I'm making, that one has to recognize that. But doesn't mean it'll happen tomorrow, but as long as anyway, Malin.
Sorry, there we absolutely agree. And the second one is, of course, the transition from knowledge to competence, which we see in the educational path, and at the same time, the transition, what I would say, from things to values. And that is really a hard story, because when we want to put measures on that, then it really takes time. Sorry, Malin, we are, Gora and me, we should take a private phone and not using the time here for everyone.
Sure.
So thank you both, and thank you everyone for being part of this. So it's been really a very good session. We are now just having an hour and a half, not in the past, it's been 2 hours long, but thank you all for joining us, and you will be receiving an invitation to the next one in January, when we will have a GovStack update from Yolanda. So thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ella.
Happy Christmas season.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.